The world he had lived in was destroyed. A portal to another world had opened, and from it emerged terrifying, powerful monsters that defied belief. Humanity had to fight tooth and nail just to survive, and he had been no different. He had spent his entire life battling monsters. Day after day, year after year, he fought. One day turned into a month into a year, and before he knew it, 10 years had passed in the blink of an eye. With a single sword, he could cut down any monster in his path. He had stopped feeling fear a long time ago. Then, one day, he encountered a monstrous entity, larger and more terrifying than anything he had ever faced. The being confronted him and told him to give up, claiming that the world he fought so hard to protect was already gone. The creature, who revealed himself to be the mastermind behind the destruction, acknowledged the boy's strength. He offered the boy a place at his side, as his sword. But the boy did not fall for his words. Gritting his teeth, he threw everything he had into an attack. His sword slashed through the air, aiming straight at the monster. The strike only managed to sever a few of the creature's fingers. The monster's red eyes flared in rage. In the moment it took the boy to glance back, the being had already moved. The boy barely dodged the follow-up attack. The monster mocked him, saying that no matter how hard he struggled, he was nothing more than an insect. With one blow, he sent the boy hurtling through the air, crashing into rubble far away. Even so, the boy stood up. He refused to surrender. He charged once more, sword in hand. The entity didn't move. He simply clenched his fist and casually punched the boy mid-attack, sending him flying again. As the boy dragged himself from the rubble, he saw the monster standing tall, now holding a sinister-looking sword. Around the monster's neck hung a glowing blue gem. The boy's eyes narrowed with determination. Both combatants prepared for a final blow. The boy hurled his sword like a javelin, it spun like a tornado, piercing through the monster's chest. The creature's blade stopped just inches from the boy's head. The boy had partially shattered the gem. The monster was in disbelief, his eyes wide with shock. Exhausted, the boy could hardly move. Then the gem shattered completely. The monster let out a furious roar, his eyes glowing bright red. And in an instant, he vanished, his body crumbling like shards of broken glass. The boy collapsed, drained of all strength. He gazed up at the sky. It was beautiful. With that final thought, he closed his eyes. Some time later, a young boy with black hair, wearing shorts and carrying a small bag, was seen walking toward the Namsan Gate. It was classified as a Grade C gate, one that recommended a minimum of 3 licensed heroes for entry. A notification warned him to scan his hero registration card and advised the general public to refrain from entering. But the boy wasn't listening. He bent his knees, readying himself, then jumped. An unknown voice echoed within the system, reporting that an unregistered individual had forcibly entered the gate. On the other side, the boy landed in a vibrant green forest. As he made his way forward, a group of people spotted him. One of the men approached and asked if he had gotten lost. They invited him to follow them. The boy said nothing. A girl in the group whispered to another member, noting that his outfit didn't resemble a registered hero's uniform. They commented on how flexible the dress codes had become lately, but his appearance still stood out. His bag especially, he looked like someone who had been abandoned by heroes. The boy finally spoke, saying he knew what they were thinking, but he had only just arrived. One of them asked bluntly if he had been left behind. The leader of the team stepped forward. He said he had seen many like the boy before, people who had come in chasing hope, revenge, or dreams. If the boy wanted to be a hero, he would first need to obtain a proper license, pass rigorous training, and start from the bottom, beginning with F-grade gates. But the boy replied that he appreciated the concern, though he wasn't particularly grateful. The entire group fell silent. Their expressions turned pale. Some of them looked ready to teach him a lesson, but the leader held them back. He said that the boy was clearly someone who didn't listen, and that such people often had to learn the hard way. He told the boy that what people saw on TV or the internet about gates was nothing like the truth. Just then, a massive green monster appeared before the boy, radiating killing intent. The boy calmly placed his bag on the ground. The monster lunged at him, swinging a heavy, crude sword. The boy dodged effortlessly. As the attack passed him, he muttered, 10 years. Before the creature could swing again, the boy clenched his fist and punched. The monster's head exploded on impact. Its body dropped to the forest floor with a thud. As the dust settled and the boy landed, he finished his sentence. Nothing different at all. The boy looked down at the corpse of the dead monster. Without hesitation, he picked up its weapon and paused for a moment, lost in thought. His gaze shifted to the neck of that monster. He pierced the monster's neck, clearly searching for something. Soon, he found it, a blood-covered gem embedded inside. It was a low-grade magic stone. The boy reflected silently that in the past, he wouldn't have even glanced at such an inferior item. Nevertheless, he opened his bag and tucked the gem inside. Just then, something caught his attention, green-skinned legs moving behind him. 3 green monsters had appeared and were charging at him from the rear. They swung their swords, but the boy evaded the attack effortlessly. In his hand, he still held the red gem. He threw it with precision, striking one of the monsters squarely on the head. The creature was thrown backward, crashing to the ground. The other 2 monsters roared in fury, but the boy didn't move. His expression remained calm and unchanging. Meanwhile, the group from earlier was walking through the forest. A girl among them voiced her concern, wondering aloud if the rude man they had encountered earlier might actually die. Another member of the group questioned whether she was really worried about him. The group's leader reassured her that if the boy was an unauthorized intruder, then by now, agents from the gate control center would be on their way. Since the Namsan gate was a C-grade gate, an elite agent of B rank or higher would be dispatched. As long as the boy didn't recklessly attack too many monsters, he wouldn't die, so there was no need to worry. A bald man in the group agreed, remarking that the rude boy was probably trembling somewhere, just waiting for the agents to rescue him. Back in the forest, the boy punched one of the monsters in the head. Seizing the moment, another monster tried to strike him from behind with its sword, but the weapon only hit the ground. The boy had vanished. In the next instant, he appeared behind the attacker and delivered a powerful kick to its head, killing it instantly. The monster collapsed beside the others. He picked up the fallen monster's weapon and muttered to himself that he had now collected 3 more magic stones. Under the clear, sunny sky, he packed his bag, reflecting that the harvest had been disappointing. So far, he had only managed to gather 12 low-grade magic stones and 16 of slightly better quality. At that moment, a man in a black suit came running toward him, calling out for someone to follow. The boy turned around, curious. He saw 4 men approaching, all dressed in the same black uniform. The leader of the group introduced themselves as agents from the gate control center. He instructed the boy to show his hero registration. If he was an unregistered hero, he would need to accompany them to the control center. The boy frowned and repeated the name aloud, Gate Control Center? He didn't seem to understand what was happening but was clearly annoyed. The agent reiterated the instruction and asked him to cooperate. As the boy began to walk away, muttering that they were annoying, the agent signaled to a subordinate to prepare the handcuffs. The subordinate explained that they were only asking for cooperation, but if he refused to comply, they would be forced to use physical means. Grabbing the boy's wrist, the agent warned him that if he resisted, any injuries sustained would be his own responsibility. He advised the boy to come with them and resolve the matter peacefully. But while the subordinate was still speaking, the boy gripped his wrist tightly, startling the agent. Calmly, the boy told them to stop bothering him and to leave. 2 of the other men clenched their teeth and drew their weapons. Blue lightning began to crackle around their blades. The boy observed this and thought to himself that they were using a 4th-grade magic sealing device, effective against orcs perhaps, but useless against someone like him. Without hesitation, he twisted the man's arm and issued a final warning. If they didn't want to get hurt any further, they should turn back immediately. He stood still. The 2 men had attacked him with everything they had, but nothing worked. One of them had attempted to punch him in the face and failed. The other had prepared to kick him, but the boy had struck first, driving his knee into the man's ribs. The man collapsed, writhing in pain. Without hesitation, the boy kicked the remaining attacker so hard that he was sent flying. Only one opponent remained, their leader. The leader clenched his teeth and glared at the boy. But before he could do anything, the boy vanished right before his eyes. The man couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Then, from his left side, a sudden punch landed in his gut, knocking the wind out of him and sending him stumbling backward. The boy called out and asked whether registered heroes ever faced any problems. The man replied that as long as they didn't commit any unusual acts inside a gate, there was no reason for agents to be dispatched. The boy then questioned him about fractured zones. Mysterious spaces connected to another world where strange monsters appeared around the globe. The man explained that byproducts obtained from monster hunting were used as new energy resources. Because of this, the state strictly controlled the gates and kept the monsters confined within them. He added that any unknown space not yet converted into a gate was referred to as a fractured zone. The boy asked if, regardless of which gate he entered, agents would always come looking for him for unauthorized entry. The man confirmed that this was correct. If an unregistered hero entered a gate without proper authorization, the control center would be automatically notified, and agents on standby in the area would be dispatched. He also stated that fractured zones were just as easy to enter as official gates, but that the Hero Association wouldn't tolerate unauthorized activity there either. The boy asked what he was supposed to do, given that situation. The man thought the boy must be insane and thought he should have just reported to headquarters in the first place. Without a word, the boy grabbed the man's face and slammed him into the ground. Then he turned and walked away, muttering that it was nothing special. The black-suited man, enraged, shouted after him that if he ever saw him again, he would kill him. His voice, trembling with fury and nearing a scream, echoed behind the boy. At that moment, the Heavenly Sword Master felt his consciousness fading, as though he were being pulled into a void. Death. That was the only word that crossed his mind. But when he opened his eyes, he found himself floating upside down. A boy stood before him. He had asked the boy who he was. The boy introduced himself as Seo Dojin and said he was dying. He told him that if his request were granted, he would quietly disappear. But he had boldly refused. Dojin looked disappointed. He explained that he no longer had any attachment to life. After fighting for 10 desperate years, he had been betrayed by a comrade he trusted. His country had been destroyed. His friends were dead, and his family too. He asked the boy what the point of life was if it only led to that. Dojin responded gently. Even if his life had ended in ruin, he hoped the remaining family, his grandmother and a girl named Eun-young, wouldn't have to suffer the same fate. The Heavenly Sword Master told him to get to the point. What exactly did he want? Smiling brightly, Dojin had told him his wish. Gazan Digital Complex, Seoul Special City, now nicknamed the Hero Complex, due to the overwhelming number of monster byproduct exchange shops compared to regular businesses. The Dojin headed there. Seeing one flashy, well-decorated shop, he wondered if it was worth trying. A sneaky-looking man greeted him warmly at the entrance. The Dojin told him that he wanted to sell some magic stones. The man enthusiastically replied that he had come to the right place. They offered the highest prices in all of Seoul, no, in all of South Korea. The boy showed him the stones. The merchant muttered under his breath that the boy could have at least wiped the blood off them first. Still, he took the stones and began to examine them. He offered the boy a cup of coffee while he sorted them. The boy replied that anything was fine. As the boy sipped his drink, the man carefully wiped and sorted the stones. After a short while, he announced his appraisal: 12 low-grade magic stones, 16 mid-low-grade stones, and 5 high-low-grade stones. He told the boy that after a 40% commission, the total payout would be 5,460,000 won. The boy immediately told him to stop. He pointed out that he had done all the hunting himself, while the merchant had merely handled the transaction. A 40% commission was absurd. The man scoffed and said the boy clearly didn't understand how the market worked. Most places charged 45%, and they were doing him a favor by only taking 40%. If he didn't like it, he could take the stones back, no one would offer him a better price. The boy began packing his things and turned to leave. But the man suddenly grabbed his wrist and told him that he had to pay a sorting fee, and the coffee wasn't free either. That would be 300,000 won for the labor and 10,000 for the coffee. The boy said flatly that he didn't have any money, and if they wanted it, they were welcome to try and take it from him. Enraged, the merchant shouted an insult and warned him that they had several C-rank heroes backing them. Moments later, 3 large, thug-like men entered the shop. One of them asked who had caused the trouble. The boy turned to face them, locking eyes with the leader. The man stared back, confused and wary. At the next moment, the man behind the counter was trembling in fear, trying to hide. But before he could even react, the leader of the thugs crashed to the ground in front of him, unconscious. The boy had taken him down in an instant. All 3 thugs now lay sprawled across the floor, groaning in pain. The boy calmly walked up to the counter and looked the man dead in the eyes. "The commission is 1%, he said flatly. "Let's do cool business from now on. I'll be back next time," and walked away. Later that evening, he placed a thick stack of cash on the table. His grandmother and younger sister Eun-young were in complete shock after seeing the money. His grandmother stared at the bills. "Where on earth did you get this kind of money?" He smiled and replied casually, "I lent some money to a businessman friend. His business suddenly became incredibly successful." His grandmother narrowed her eyes. "Did you even have a friend like that?" He chuckled softly. "You know where I grew up. He's someone I used to hang out with back then." Hearing that, his grandmother finally relaxed a little, though her worry hadn't fully disappeared. Then Eun-young's voice piped up. "Does that mean we're rich now?" He placed his hand gently on her head and said with a small smile, "Yeah. From now on, we are." Eun-young squealed with joy and began dancing around her grandmother with innocent excitement. At that moment, he remembered the words Dojin had spoken to him just before vanishing. "Make sure Grandma and Eun-young live in the safest house anywhere." Dojin hadn't waited for a response. He simply disappeared. When he woke up, he had become Seo Dojin. He later discovered that the safest house in Korea cost over 11 billion won in the current market. It was a ridiculous amount. He didn't feel any real obligation to fulfill such a one-sided promise, but still, he thought, if only my strength returns, that kind of money will mean nothing. Compared to his previous world, now lost and overrun by monsters, the gates, fractures, and creatures in this place were child's play. He had once been the sword god, a warrior who had stood at the peak of humanity. And yet, not even 10% of his power had returned. Suddenly, someone called from outside. He stood up and told his grandmother he'd go check. Opening the door, he saw 2 men standing there, thugs, judging by their rough appearance. The taller one spoke first. "You should repay the money you borrowed on time, don't you think?" The other one added mockingly, "Do you even know how much you owe?" "A full 48 million won." He narrowed his eyes. Loan sharks, he thought. It must have been a debt taken by the real Dojin before dying, probably the 5 million won he borrowed for Grandma's hospital bills. And now, in a matter of weeks, it had grown tenfold. The thugs told him they knew he had entered a gate and made some money, so he should hand it all over. According to the contract, they were just collecting what was rightfully theirs. Without another word, Dojin's fist flew through the air, striking the thug behind the tall one. The man was launched backward, crashing into the wall and falling unconscious. The yellow-haired thug stood in shock, stammering, What the hell just happened?" Dojin stared him down coldly. "I've already paid back over 9 million won. If anything, you owe me now." Trembling, the remaining thug stuttered, Are you really Dojin?" Dojin stepped forward slowly, tightening his fist again. "Tell your boss," he said with a glare, "that I'll be visiting soon." A thud rang out a moment later, echoing through the neighborhood. Later, at a supermarket near the doll shop, Eun-young looked up at him with wide, hopeful eyes. "Can I really buy a new doll?" He smiled. "We've already bought clothes, so now. Buy whatever you want." As he watched her, he felt something stir within him. Dojin's memories were mixing with his own. Though his heart had long since dried up, something awkward and unfamiliar was starting to form there, sympathy. It was still faint, but genuine. Dojin had clearly cared deeply for Eun-young, his half-sister from a different father. At the very least, he thought, I'll protect that feeling. She held up a small, plain-looking doll. Can I get this one? Instead, he handed her a large, fluffy one and said warmly, pick whatever you like. Her smile lit up the entire shop. At the food court, the siblings sat side by side, enjoying burgers and noodles. For the first time in a while, the atmosphere was light, peaceful. Then, from behind them, a shrill voice called out. Dojin. He turned his head. A chubby girl stood there, flanked by 2 bodyguards. Her tone was mocking. What's with those clothes, she sneered. And who's that next to you? Did she cause an accident like your mother did? Dojin's gaze darkened instantly. Beside him, Eun-young looked up at the girl, confused and nervous. Who is this woman? She wondered. Dojin remained silent, his gaze cold. The woman standing across from him stared intently, trying to read his expression, while Eun-young looked between the two in confusion. The woman suddenly turned to Eun-young. What's your name? She asked with a forced smile. Eun-young replied politely, I'm Lee Eun-young. The woman scoffed. Even your name is plain. And your clothes, you look just as shabby as his mother. She turned back to Dojin, her expression twisted. Am I wrong? Say something. What, are you mute now? Dojin still said nothing. The woman clicked her tongue in annoyance, then looked down at Eun-young again. Do you even know what a slut is? At that moment, Dojin's expression changed. His voice was low, venomous. Ugly like an orc, this bitch. She froze and slowly turned her head toward him. His eyes were burning with fury. Seo Dojin, born an illegitimate child, raised in poverty. His mother had died when he was only 7. After that, he'd been taken in by his biological father's family, but not out of love. For over a decade, he endured their scorn and contempt. After the legal wife gave birth to a son, Dojin was treated as if he never existed. Eventually, they discarded him again, sending him to live with a grandmother and a half-sister he had never met before. And yet, he had endured it all. What kind of heart did he carry through those years? He wondered. But now, he thought, I'm not the same person anymore. Dojin glared at the yellow-haired woman, his voice sharp with contempt. We lived under the same roof for 12 years, and you were disgusting the entire time. Your face is hideous, your personality even worse. On top of that, you're so dumb you couldn't even pass a basic school exam. His words cut deep, but he continued without hesitation. You've always had that ugly inferiority complex toward women who are prettier or kinder than you. That's why you're acting like this toward a child. A girl who's more considerate than you'll ever be, just because she's poor. The girl's face twisted with rage. What did you say to me? Before Dojin could respond, a voice called out from a distance. It's been a while, Dojin. A well-dressed woman approached. The yellow-haired girl immediately ran toward her, crying out, Mom, and began complaining. The woman hushed her. Enough. Stay quiet. Then she looked at her and spoke gently, what kind of behavior is that? Really, Dojin, how have you been? If you're so busy, you could have at least come home once in a while. Your father's been worried about you. Dojin stared at her, his voice laced with bitterness. Fake bitch. This woman had tormented him for nearly 12 years. He replied coldly, that makes me sick. We're not close enough to care about each other's well-being. His voice was firm. Get lost. Her face stiffened, her eyes flashing red with restrained anger, but she said nothing more. She turned and began walking away, the yellow-haired girl trailing behind her. Is that really Dojin? She thought in disbelief. The same kid who used to bow his head in silence even when I slapped him for no reason? As he watched them leave, Dojin turned to Eun-young and spoke softly, let's go too. There's no reason to stay here. He thought back to the Dojin who couldn't speak up for himself, who had always swallowed his pain and anger. That version of him was gone. It'd be good if they realized that sooner rather than later. Inside the car, the yellow-haired girl sat fuming. "Why did we just leave?" she demanded. "You should have taught him a lesson." The woman ignored her daughter and turned to the man driving. "Manager Lee, why is Dojin still alive?" He flinched. According to the report, Kong Chiak-woo definitely left Dojin in the gate. Her voice rose sharply. "Exactly. So why is the man who was supposed to die still breathing?" I'll look into it," Manager Lee stammered. The girl looked between them, shocked. "What do you mean, supposed to die? What do you mean by that? What the hell have you done? Did you try to kill Dojin?" Her mother glanced back coldly. "Do you still like Dojin?" The girl turned red. "It's not like that. If your grandfather or father finds out about this." Before she could finish, the woman grabbed her by the mouth and silenced her. "This is something I will handle," she said icily. "You just mind your own business." As the car rolled forward, the woman stared ahead, her thoughts dark. "How dare he talk back to me?" She fumed. "No matter what. I will get rid of him." 10 years ago, fracture zones began to appear across the world. From these fractures, monsters emerged and started attacking humans, plunging the world into chaos. However, the arrival of heroes quickly brought the situation under control. Magic stones, extracted from the bodies of these monsters, soon replaced traditional energy sources. With this shift, nations around the globe redirected their efforts toward transforming the fractures into gates. As a result, the global industrial structure evolved to revolve around these gates and the heroes who ventured into them. In this new world, becoming a hero became the primary path to earning a living. After a short walk, he arrived in front of the Yongdongpo HCS Capitol building and entered their office. Inside, a thug wearing sunglasses was exhaling cigarette smoke. He looked up at Dojin and asked in a hostile tone what he was doing there. He accused Dojin of beating up his men and still having the audacity to show up. Dojin calmly replied that, no matter how he looked at it, he felt he was the one who had suffered losses. The thug scoffed and asked what kind of losses he was talking about. Dojin told him he believed he deserved compensation for the mental, physical, and material damages he had endured because of them. The boss of the thugs observed Dojin carefully. He thought to himself that the once gentle young man had clearly changed. Judging by how thoroughly he had beaten his men, it seemed likely that Dojin had awakened inside a gate. The thug then issued a warning, suggesting that if Dojin had found something to rely on, he should be shown what happened to those who got cocky after awakening. At that moment, 3 more thugs entered the room and glared at Dojin. Their leader told him that those who got arrogant after awakening always ended up as trash. He claimed he had more than enough people under him to silence any overconfident degrade. Dojin remained silent. Then, in a calm but commanding voice, he told the leader to sit down. His eyes glowed with a deep purple hue as he locked eyes with the thug and said he wasn't done speaking. The thug in sunglasses charged at Dojin, shouting about how a young punk dared to speak so informally. Dojin picked up a nearby glass and smashed it into the thug's face, knocking him out cold. While beating the others, he addressed the leader and commented that they weren't just involved in loan sharking, he knew they also forged IDs. Dojin said he needed a hero ID in order to earn money in this new world. The remaining thugs rushed at him, but each was quickly defeated with a single blow and left unconscious on the ground. Turning back to the leader, Dojin ordered him to prepare a flawless ID with no complications, and to have it ready by tomorrow. Seeing Dojin's overwhelming strength, everyone in the room was frozen in fear. The leader began to wonder just how powerful Dojin had become. He thought to himself, is this guy really D-grade? No. It might even be C-grade. Or maybe B-grade already? Dojin asked him again why he wasn't answering. The leader quickly agreed to the request. Dojin placed a firm hand on his shoulder and asked another question, whether Hong Hee-ju had ordered him to kill Dojin. At the mention of her name, the leader fell silent. When Dojin didn't receive a reply, he pressed down hard on the man's collarbone, causing him to scream in pain. Finally, the thug confessed. Hong Hee-ju. That woman said it. She said she hoped you'd suffer in debt until you eventually committed suicide. He begged him to let him go. Dojin then asked him if he had trapped him inside a gate. The leader shook his head and insisted he didn't know anything about that. He claimed there would be no profit in Dojin dying, so there was no way he would have sent him into a gate. After thinking for a moment, Dojin told the thug to bring information on someone else, Kong Cheol-woo, the man who had taken him to the gate. He instructed the thug to deliver the details by the next day. The thug nodded and agreed. With that, Dojin left the office. Outside, he reflected on the real Dojin, the version of himself who had once endured everything alone. As he walked away, he resolved that while he was at it, he would settle everything once and for all. Dojin noticed that his identification card had finally arrived, and saw that his assigned grade was B. He scanned his ID at the gate, and the system immediately notified him that his registration had been confirmed. However, it also issued a warning: his grade was below the recommended level. Entering could be dangerous, and he was advised to think carefully before proceeding. He thought about the thug's leader and muttered to himself that they should have just made him an A-grade ID. Then, without hesitation, he stepped forward and entered the gate. The system repeated its warning: his classification was below the recommended grade. He had entered the Bamsium gate, a B-grade gate with a D-grade scale, categorized as a tunnel-type gate. The recommended hero grade was A, and no more than 2 people were allowed to enter at a time. A B-grade gate with a D scale meant it was challenging to clear alone. The tunnel format only allowed solo entry, which made it nearly impossible to complete unless the player was A grade or higher. If luck was particularly bad, one could end up facing hundreds of monsters alone in a narrow, dark passage. At the end of the tunnel ahead of him, a serpent with a golden head appeared. Dojin looked at it with interest and said he liked the look of it, then braced himself for combat. The serpent launched a black dart from its mouth, but Dojin responded swiftly, piercing its neck and retrieving the magic stone from inside its body. As the serpent writhed in agony, he identified it as a black death viper, a venomous snake whose poison could paralyze with just a graze. He landed back on the ground and immediately leaped again, slicing through another serpent and cleaving it into 2 pieces. Briefly, he glanced at the gloves he had purchased for 300,000 won. Before he could dwell on that, 4 more serpents appeared behind him. With swift precision, he grabbed their necks, twisted them, and severed their heads. Now standing atop a pile of serpent corpses, he began checking for magic stones. But none of them had any. He thought to himself that if things were the same as in the previous world, the chance of getting a magic stone from a black death viper was only around 3%. That meant he would need to kill several hundred of them. Upon entering the next chamber, he saw human skeletons scattered everywhere. As he looked up, another serpent appeared, this one larger, with a golden head and piercing green eyes. Dojin concluded that this must be the boss. Without hesitation, he attacked. He wasn't sure where the tunnel led beyond this point, but he figured things were going well enough. However, when his fist connected with the boss monster, he was shocked at how little damage it did. He realized he would need to finish the fight quickly and make his exit. The serpent lashed its tail and sent him crashing into the rubble. As it lunged toward him with its mouth wide open, he narrowly dodged the bite in time. He dashed forward and struck again, but it was no use, his attacks weren't working. The monster stared at him with glowing green eyes, and he immediately sensed that it was on a completely different level from the others. Its surface was too tough. Regular punches wouldn't be enough. Dojin lamented that if he had regained his full strength, a monster like this would have been finished already. His eyes landed on a broken sword lying near his leg. After a moment of thought, he grabbed it and muttered that even though it was old and worn, he had no choice. A weapon's worth depended on who wielded it. Sword in hand, he advanced once again. As the monster lunged forward, Dojin leapt into the air and declared that it should consider it an honor to be personally smashed to pieces. Gripping the sword tightly as the serpent surged toward him, he unleashed a final strike. A golden light erupted from the blade, piercing the serpent. The sword shattered into pieces from the force of the attack. He sighed in relief, thinking it could have been a disaster if he hadn't landed that blow. He looked down at the dead serpent's head and found a small, gem-like blade embedded within. If polished, it might be usable. Compared to what he had earned at the Namsan Gate, the rewards here were better, that much was fortunate. Still, he couldn't believe it had taken so long just to clear a single B-grade gate. Now, he told himself, recovering his strength had to be the top priority. And perhaps it was for the best that his old comrades hadn't seen him in such a state. At a well-decorated magic stone exchange shop, a middle-aged man stood at the counter, handing over a bundle of magic stones. The receptionist, smiling professionally, complimented him on collecting such high-quality stones and reminded him that the usual commission rate was 40%. The man frowned slightly and questioned whether the commission wasn't too steep. He pointed out that he was a regular customer, shouldn't that qualify him for some kind of discount? The receptionist, maintaining his tone, explained that as he already knew, their commission was the cheapest in the area. At the gate center alone, the rate was 50%, and unlike their shop didn't record transactions, so there were no taxes. With all things considered, it was still a profitable and clean deal. As the man counted his money, he glanced at the receptionist and asked why his face looked so battered. With a sigh, the receptionist explained that a man had come in and beaten both the guards and himself to a pulp. The middle-aged man clicked his tongue and remarked that the shop had it coming for relying on C-grade guards. He advised that they should value skill over rank when hiring protection. Grades, he said, were made for the convenience of government bureaucrats, but real skill was something else. A freshly certified guard and a veteran hero who risked their life fighting monsters couldn't possibly have the same level of ability. Meanwhile, the receptionist silently wished the man would just take his money and leave instead of lecturing him. But the older man, with a hint of familiarity, told the receptionist that they'd known each other for a long time. He should feel free to contact him if he ever needed help. With that, he turned to leave. Just then, Dojin was walking toward the counter. The moment the receptionist spotted him, his eyes widened, and he shouted to the middle-aged man, "That's him. That's the guy who hit me." The man paused and turned to look at Dojin, raising an eyebrow. He asked the receptionist if he was sure this tall young man with such a striking, handsome face was the one who caused the ruckus. Clenching his fist, the man stepped forward and confronted Dojin. He asked if Dojin had really caused trouble here and demanded to know what kind of hero beat up innocent people. Didn't he understand that heroes were meant to protect civilians, not attack them? The receptionist, watching nervously, thought to himself that this man was a veteran hero with 7 years of experience. He had deep connections among both senior and junior heroes. If things got messy, Dojin might regret it. But Dojin, unfazed, told the man to mind his own business and get lost. The room fell silent. Both the gentleman and the receptionist were left speechless by Dojin's bluntness. Dojin then added, with a provocative edge, "Do you want revenge?" The man clenched his fists, clearly agitated, but then paused. He recalled that the number one cause of hero deaths wasn't monsters, it was conflicts between heroes themselves. With that thought in mind, he said he would meet them next time, muttered that he was busy, and walked away. As the man exited, the receptionist stood there, dumbfounded. Dojin turned to him and asked if he had a lot of complaints about him. Without waiting for an answer, Dojin threw a bag full of magic stones onto the counter and told the receptionist to calculate the total. The receptionist's eyes widened at the sight of the high-grade magic stones inside. Goosebumps ran down his arms as he wondered what kind of background Dojin had. After tallying the contents, he nervously informed Dojin that the total came to 150 million won. Dojin nodded and told him to bring the money. He thought to himself that after hunting all day, he was only getting 150 million won. In a shaky voice, the receptionist reminded him that they still had to deduct the commission. He suddenly wondered if he had said something wrong. To his surprise, Dojin smiled and said yes, deduct the 1% commission. He told the receptionist to bring 148.5 million won. The receptionist cursed Dojin internally. The actual commission was 40%, why couldn't he understand that? Trying to keep calm, the receptionist explained that for transactions over 100 million won, he needed permission from the higher-ups. Dojin responded coldly, telling him to get that permission right now. The receptionist made a call to his boss, beginning to explain the situation, but halfway through, Dojin snatched the phone from his hand. Speaking directly into it, he told the owner that if he understood the situation, then he should give him the money. The man on the other end, recognizing the tone, said that he understood and asked Dojin to return the phone to the receptionist. Dojin tossed the phone straight into the concrete wall, where it got stuck. As the trembling receptionist stared at the embedded phone, Dojin calmly said that his boss understood, so he should bring the money. The receptionist returned with the cash stuffed into a paper bag, his hands shaking. Dojin, unfazed, told him they should do cool business next time. 10 minutes later, the boss of the shop arrived and immediately asked the receptionist why he hadn't been answering his phone. He also demanded to know what that call earlier had been about. The receptionist, pale and exhausted, told his boss that he wanted to quit. He couldn't take it anymore. When the boss saw that the receptionist's phone was embedded in the concrete wall, he sighed and immediately called his niece, Juyun, asking her to come to the shop. Meanwhile, on the road outside, passers-by were stunned as a tall woman with striking purple hair walked gracefully through the streets. People whispered in amazement. They couldn't believe they were seeing Hyen Juyun. She walked elegantly up to the Magic Stone Exchange shop. When she entered, the young receptionist's jaw nearly dropped. Was that really her? She confirmed it with a confident nod. Yes, I'm Hyen Juyun. The receptionist was in disbelief. South Korea's 4th S-grade hero, Hyen Juyun, he had heard rumors that she was the boss's niece, but why had she come herself? She answered his question before he could ask, saying that because of a certain hero who was forcing them into difficult sales, her uncle now had a serious headache. She wanted to hear the full story. At Dojin's house, the atmosphere was calm. Dojin sat cross-legged, meditating quietly while Young played nearby with her doll. As he gathered mana, a frown crept onto his face. Despite hunting all day, he was barely making 100 million won, it was too slow. He thought to himself that he needed to reach the point where he could hunt S-grade gates solo. But for that, he would have to regain the power he once had. Yet unlike the previous world, the mana in the air here was thin. Even if he gathered it like this every day, it might take 3 years, maybe even longer. Good weapons and equipment would help, but in this world, even entry-level gear costs hundreds of millions. Just then, Dojin's eyes snapped open. Something felt off. He turned sharply toward Young, scooped her up, and told her to get inside quickly. After entering the house, he shut the door behind them. His grandmother, startled, asked what was happening. Before he could answer, the ground shook violently. Furniture rattled, and the windows trembled in their frames. Young burst into tears, frightened by the sudden chaos. But Dojin's eyes narrowed. This wasn't an ordinary earthquake, it was a fracture. In the backyard, a section of space began to shimmer and tear apart, purple light flickering at its edges. The fabric of reality split open, forming a gate. His grandmother, confused and alarmed, asked again what was going on. Dojin quickly told her to stay in her room and not come out, no matter what. Without hesitation, he stepped outside and entered the fracture. Meanwhile, in Seoul Special City Hero Association headquarters, an officer rushed to report to his superior. A new fracture has been detected in Mapo, the officer said urgently. The team leader furrowed his brow. Another one? It's only been 63 days since the last. He immediately instructed the team to contact the White Lion Guild, the closest to Mapo, and coordinate with any other nearby heroes. Where exactly is the fracture located? He asked. The officer replied, it's inside the yard of a residential home. The team leader went pale. A residential location meant that if a new hero entered the fracture first, no one else would be able to enter until that person came back out. And if that hero died, a monster wave would break out and persist for 10 days. If that happened, all of Seoul could be in danger. Has the identity of the person who entered been confirmed? The team leader asked. One officer responded, yes. His name is Seo Dojin. He's the resident of the house where the fracture appeared. According to the initial report, his grandmother claimed he entered the gate while trying to protect his sister. Silence fell over the room as the implications settled in. The officer continued grimly, he's not a registered hero. Statistically, when an unawakened civilian enters a new fracture, the chance of a monster wave occurring is 99.99%. Elsewhere, a thick stack of documents was dropped onto a table. Hong Hee-ju, an elegant, she looked up at Manager Lee and snapped, "What do you mean Dojin awakened?" Manager Lee calmly explained that while Dojin hadn't yet registered with the Hero Association, it was now certain he had awakened during his last gate entry. Hong Hee-ju's expression darkened. Then what was that fool Kong Cheol-woo doing? He should have killed Dojin when he had the chance. Why make things complicated and still take payment? She instructed Manager Lee to deliver a message to Kong Cheol-woo. If he couldn't kill Dojin, he'd have to repay 10 times the money he was given. But Manager Lee shook his head. There's no need to contact him. A new fracture appeared in Mapo, at Dojin's house. We've confirmed that he entered it. The media will announce it soon. Hee-ju smirked slightly. So? I won't have to see him again? That's right, Lee replied. After a pause, she ordered him to continue monitoring the situation until it's certain. Inside the fracture, Dojin stepped barefoot into an unfamiliar forest. As he took in the surroundings, a wave of disbelief washed over him. This place, it was hard to believe. He was standing in the Padishur forest, a place he had often visited as a child in the other world. The layout, the types of trees, the scent of the grass, even the wind, everything was identical. The mana in the air was rich and vibrant, unlike anything in the current world. Even the shape of the sky and clouds matched his memories. Dojin looked toward the horizon and immediately knew where the exit was. As expected, it's the world tree, he murmured to himself. From the top branch of a tall tree, he looked out and saw it, the world tree, ancient and towering. It was a sacred entity, the very heart of pure mana flow. In his previous world, that tree had burned down, and its destruction was what had eventually led to that world's ruin. But here, it was still intact. He didn't understand why, or how, but if the tree was still alive, then he could regain the mana and power he once had. Without hesitation, Dojin approached the world tree and seated himself within a hollow at its base. He closed his eyes and began to meditate, drawing in the thick, nourishing mana that pulsed through the air. Dojin continued to meditate in silence. His breathing flowed with rhythmic precision, perfectly aligned with the flow of mana in the air. Like that, 1 day passed, then 2, and 3. Time became meaningless as he sat there without eating or drinking, focusing solely on his breathing and mana flow. 10 full days went by in complete concentration. Then, a sound broke the stillness. Dojin opened his eyes, snapping out of his deep meditation. In the distance, he spotted a group of monsters approaching the world tree. They were grotesque creatures with branching limbs, a species known as Volcina, the very monsters responsible for burning down the world tree in the past. He scowled at them, recognizing the threat. If only I had a water attribute sword, he thought. But even without it, he wasn't about to let history repeat itself. The Volcina charged the world tree, but Dojin remained calm. It didn't matter what kind of creatures they were, he would reduce them to dust. Raising his hand, he gathered blue energy around his palm. Then, with a sharp motion, he released it toward the monsters. A brilliant wave of mana burst forth. The monsters disintegrated mid-air, and the few that survived were severely wounded. Their cries echoed through the forest, drawing the attention of even more monsters. Another group of Volcina began to converge on the area. Dojin raised his hand again, channeling mana. He began to compress and condense it into raw ki, preparing it for release. As the dense energy swirled around him, he felt a momentary discomfort. It had been a long time since he had discharged such massive amounts of mana. The monsters retaliated. One opened its mouth and fired a concentrated blast of energy toward him. But Dojin didn't flinch. He extended his hand and summoned a mana shield, deflecting the attack with ease. As the smoke cleared, he stepped forward and muttered that he had now confirmed the world tree's safety. He turned his gaze back toward the monsters. He wanted to evaluate his own mana flow more directly, through combat. With an intense glare, he observed one of the Volcina preparing another attack. Dojin sprang forward, grabbed 2 monsters by their jaws, and slammed their heads together. Their necks erupted into purple flames before the bodies disintegrated, leaving behind magic stones. He moved methodically toward the remaining monsters, declaring that he had confirmed something important: defeating these monsters could yield undying embers. His eyes lit up with anticipation. With renewed energy, he launched himself at the remaining volcana, eager to see how many more magic stones he could gather. One by one, the monsters fell. Eventually, only Dojin remained, standing in silence beside the world tree. At his feet lay a glowing ember, a golden light resting next to a pile of magic stones. He bent down, picked it up, and began to absorb it into his body. He couldn't believe his luck. A golden ember, a rare and powerful resource, now pulsed through his veins. Flames ignited around his hand as he absorbed its essence. He thought to himself that while it would have been ideal to gather more mana directly from the world tree, but his current body wouldn't be able to handle the sheer volume of pure mana. For now, absorbing the embers was his best option. Flames began to seep from his hands and mouth. In the past, he had ignored these embers. Back then, it took 10 full minutes just to absorb one, making them inefficient. But this time, as he looked around, he saw that the ground was covered with golden embers. He no longer intended to ignore them. Now, he was determined to absorb as many as he possibly could.